Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Please take your seats. We'd like to start on time. So once again, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the 2018 European Network of Ombudsmen Conference. I'm Shada Islam. I'm Director for Europe and Geopolitics at Friends of Europe, an independent think tank here in Brussels, and it's my pleasure for the third year running to moderate and facilitate this conference and this debate. For this opening session, we also have among us, of course, we have the Ombudsman from across Europe, but we also have with us civil society and journalists, so welcome to you as well. As you know, the afternoon session is really restricted to the Ombudsman to talk about the issues that concern all of you together. I will now ask Emily O'Reilly to kick off this conference with a few words of welcome, and then we will start a panel discussion with the panelists who I will introduce to you after Emily O'Reilly, the Ombudsman, has spoken. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shada. Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to see you all here, and thank you so much for coming. And I'd like to say particularly to the women delegates, Happy International Women's Day. It's nice to be celebrating it here together. So I'm very grateful to all of you for taking the time to be with us, and I look forward to a useful and hopefully lively day and a half. Every time I've greeted you in this forum over the past few years, I have remarked that we are gathering at a challenging time for the European Union, and I've come to realise that there is never a time that isn't challenging for the EU. The only thing that changes is the nature of the challenge, or indeed challenges, at any particular time. Last year and the year before, we spent a lot of time discussing the rule of law, the refugee crisis, and the implications of the UK's decision to leave the Union. This year, we have decided, in a sense, to go back to basics, to examine the everyday work that we do as we help our citizens to deal with the challenges that they face in their daily lives. What has prompted this to some degree has been the joint proclamation late last year by the EU's Parliament, Council and Commission of the so-called European Pillar of Social Rights. These are 20 principles and rights concerning three broad categories: equal opportunities and access to the labour market, fair working conditions, and social protection and inclusion. The stated aim of the pillar is towards social progress and full employment. A lengthy consultation identified the main issues that the pillar is intended to address, including the social consequences of the economic crisis, inequalities and unemployment, the future of work, the ageing of the EU's population, and the economic divergence across member states. In other words, those issues that many citizens feel were set aside or ignored since the crisis hit approximately 10 years ago. The renewed political focus on social inclusion and on tackling inequalities does not emerge, of course, from an exclusively charitable impulse, but rather the political imperative to protect the Union at a time of challenge by addressing in a more focused and concrete way the direct concerns of its citizens. It is also part of the wider debate on the future of the European Union. At its launch, Commission President Juncker said, "Today we commit ourselves to a set of 20 principles and rights, from the right to fair wages, to the right to health care, from lifelong learning, a better work-life balance, and gender equality, to minimum income. With the European Pillar of Social Rights, the EU stands up for the rights of its citizens in a fast-changing world." So what is the specific relevance of this to ombudsmen and to civil society organisations? The relevance is that the new rights are not currently enforceable within the EU unless the pillar itself becomes enforceable in the application of EU law, as the Charter of Fundamental Rights eventually did, unless the EU or the Member States bring forward specific laws that would make them enforceable, or unless national or EU courts begin to use so-called rights contained within the social pillar to support future rulings in these areas. They are therefore not rights that are fully formed, but rather in gestation. To use a different analogy, the EU has created a machine that cannot be operated without a key. And in the absence of the pillar being afforded the same legal weight as the Charter of Fundamental Rights, that key lies in all of our hands. The EU Commission has said, delivering on these principles and rights is a joint responsibility. Most of the tools required to deliver on the pillar are in the hands of local, regional and national authorities, as well as the social partners and civil society at large. The European Union and the European Commission in particular can help by setting the framework, giving the direction and establishing a level playing field in full respect of specific national circumstances and institutional setups. While this is essential, action at EU level will need to be supported and followed up at all levels of responsibility." End of quote. Or, as one commentator put it, the social pillar is a window of opportunity whose impact largely depends on whether relevant actors will take it seriously. So gathered together in this room today are, I believe, some of those, indeed many of those, relevant actors. As Ombudsmen, we may be able, individually or collectively, to draw on the so-called pillar rights in support of our work and our recommendations, and the role of civil society is an obvious one. But like any new instrument, it takes time even for knowledge or awareness of it to become embedded. And I have no doubt but that the process of giving concrete reality to this pillar may be slow. But as an Ombudsman, I see that role, our role, as an influencer. And it is clear from the statement about the pillar by the EU institutions that it will remain an inanimate document, a simple collection of words, unless people decide to animate it, to breathe life into it, and we have to decide whether we want to do that, to use our soft powers, our influence, to begin that process. That will be the central topic of this morning's discussion with our expert panel, and then taking from the views and experience of all of you. We will also look at the wider issues concerning the future of Europe and where the current debate at member state and institutional level is likely to lead. Will it lead to a fairer and more inclusive society for citizens? Later sessions will explore that work more concretely, and particularly the tools that we as Ombudsmen can use to help our citizens in their own countries when experiencing cross-border issues or in helping those from outside our borders who come to seek our protection. And I want this conference to remind us again of the powers that we have. Yes, we work from different mandates, different cultural expectations of our work, different political circumstances, and we also, as individuals, have our own unique personalities which impact on the way in which we do our work and how we see our role. But the people who come to us don't spend too much time considering these differences. They see us, no matter what country we work in, as someone who is there simply to help them, and that is the obligation that binds us all. A few weeks ago, I was talking to a politician from a member state, a young man, talented and ambitious, and I remarked that he had a lot of power. He responded that he didn't really have power, but rather influence. But that is, I said, exactly what power means. And this is vital for Ombudsmen. Few of us can make binding decisions. Few of us can force things through simply by ordering an institution or an agency to act. But what we can do is summon all of the soft powers at our disposal, join that to our own obligation to the public, see our role in its fullest manifestation, and attempt to bring about important change as a result. It is said that you begin to lose power the first time you think you don't have any. So all of us have to remind ourselves of the power that we do have. The social pillar, I believe, is there to be used in that way, as are many other EU instruments, including my own office, the EU Parliament's Petition Committee, agencies such as Solvit, the Charter of Fundamental Rights, and the rights contained in the treaties themselves. And of particular relevance to this vital issue for citizens is the European Economic and Social Committee, the voice of civil society throughout the EU, and deeply involved, therefore, in social Europe. And I am therefore very grateful for the presence here today of EESC President Mr. George Dassis and greatly look forward to his contribution. It is said that many rights are not enforced simply because people don't realise they have them or know how to engage them. Rather, they rely on us as Ombudsmen and on many of the civil society and other actors represented in this room to make those rights a reality. So thank you once again for making the journey to Brussels, and I hope you will both enjoy and profit from our gathering here this week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily O'Reilly, for stressing the soft power and influence of all of you here. Also underlining that the social pillar is there, but it has to be used. There has to be a key, and that you are really the key to do this. But all of this, of course, is also linked to the future of Europe, which is the subject we're going to discuss now in this panel. The future of Europe, really, we live in uncertain times. All our values, all the progress we've made so far, our principles are being tested every single day. And as Emily said, the real challenge now is to build an inclusive, tolerant, and open Europe. So let's take this discussion a bit further. Let's explore what are the challenges that you as Ombudsman face, but also the wider issue of Europe today. Let me introduce the panel now. We have with us Ulrike Guérot. I don't think her name will not. She's a very important person dealing with the issue of your future of Europe. She's a professor of European policy and the study of democracy, and the author of a book that we've all read, I hope, I have, Manifesto for a European Republic, published in 2013, and still very, very valid for what the challenges are today. Also pleased to have with us George Dassis, President of the European Economic and Social Committee. Welcome, Monsieur Dassis. Three ombudsmen from three countries that are also very important in discussions about the future of Europe. Reinier van Zutphen, Reinier, on crutches here, but still very active and very vocal about his challenges and the way he works, Ombudsman of the Netherlands. Andreas Pottakis, Greek Ombudsman, thank you very much for being here as well. And last but not least, Bodnar, the Polish Ombudsman as well. So the rules of the game, if I could just tell you, are that I'm going to ask them a few questions, follow-up questions. There'll be a little discussion amongst themselves, and then I'm going to open the floor for questions and comments from yourselves. But before we do that, there is a video that we would like to show you. So my friends are going to launch the video now. There you go.
Wenn wir der sozialen Fragmentierung und dem Sozialdumping in Europa ein Ende setzen wollen, sollen die Mitgliedstaaten sich so schnell wie möglich und spätestens beim Göteborg-Gipfel im November auf die europäische Säule sozialer Rechte einigen. Ich bleibe davon überzeugt, damit Europa gelingt, darf es den Arbeitnehmern nicht die kalte Schulter zeigen.
The EU is not a market or a currency. Those are instruments. It's not just about consumers who consume, it's about citizens, real people, who try to make a living, getting their kids through school, struggling for a better future. I think Europe has a role in protecting and strengthening the rights of all our people. And we are not a day too late to do so.
We are well on track towards the proclamation of the European Pillar of Social Rights by the three EU institutions. This will send a strong political signal for our citizens that Europe shares important social values and stands ready to defend a vision for a fair society now and in the future.
We want a European Union where everyone has a chance in life and can rely on minimum standards enshrined in the European Pillar of Social Rights. And we work towards a better labour market where fairness is more than just a nice word.
Nationale Sozialsysteme werden noch lange unterschiedlich und eigenständig bleiben. Doch wir sollten uns zumindest auf eine Europäische Union der Sozialstandards verständigen, in denen es einen Konsens darüber gibt, was in unserem Binnenmarkt sozial fair und was in unserem Binnenmarkt sozial unfair ist.
So, a lot of promises, a lot of pledges, a lot of values and principles enunciated by our top policymakers. I'm going to turn to you, the panelists. Do you think these principles, these values, these social values are actually being implemented with the kind of energy and vigor that we need in today's Europe? Ulrike, very briefly.
Yeah. Is this working? Yeah. I'm very happy to be here, so it's always nice to be in Brussels. Thanks to the Ombudsman for inviting me. I was told to have something like 3 or 4 minutes to make 2 or 3 points to basically sketch out my ideas on the future of Europe and social rights especially. 2 pre-notes. I think what we are in terms of the period of the time, is that we have 2 competing tendencies. If we look around what is happening in Europe, we do have, and we should not deny, a huge force of populism, nationalism, and these people are strong. They have media influence, they have networks, they have money. There is a money factor of people who are financing these national networks for reason. So we should not shy away from that task because it gets structural and it gets systemic. If you look into Hungary today, into Poland, into even, you know, countries like Austria or so, if you have FPÖ people in institutions, then there will be changes, and these changes are systematic. I just as a pre-note that we should be careful, and that is not an anti-Polish statement I want to say. We also need to reflect that we heard the Poles before they turned nationalist. We didn't let them into the euro in 2011 when they were planned to coming in the euro. I'm German, we built Gazprom without asking them. So there are reasons, and we should also as a EU system consider some part of the populism as a reaction to a system which did not evolve. Second, if that is the one tendency, I think there's a competing tendency, and that is the nice tendency I see, and all people in the room here are part of that tendency. There's a lot of talk about citizens. There are the towns waking up, there are the ombudsmen. There has been never ever, I'm doing Europe since 25 years, so much talk about the citizens and their role in the European system. So I think there is this parallel movement that we are all waking up, and that there are many, many actors coming in. And these actors is not only the EU, these actors are towns, these sittings, the rebel cities, Podemos, young people, the people who are preparing the national elections for the next EP. So there's basically competing sort of streamings in Europe today. And what is good about these competing streamings is that they have nothing to do with national origin. Whether you are French or British or Polish does not depend on where you place on that equation. You are in the equation for a future of Europe, which is a tolerant, inclusive Europe, and so on and so forth, or you're on the other side of the equation, but you can be Polish, French, Austrian on the other side of the equation. It has nothing to do with national origins. My point here in one sentence is I feel closer to Poles going against the peace government today and the women going against the regulation on abortion in Poland, then as a German I feel close to Pegida, people in my country who are demonstrating. So for the first time perhaps in Europe we are experiencing a moment in time where basically political orientation tops national origin, and that is very nice. So now what do I come if I consider that as being the competing sort of moment in time? I come to think that really the value of the citizen is absolutely key, but not in the way we are discussing this, sort of the citizens are the civil society and they have sort of, you know, some identity and we love each other because we are the European citizens or so, and it's all about culture because we are so nice and the cool in Europe, yeah? I do actually think, and I will give you 2 or 3 definitions, that citizenship does have a normative underpinning. And only if we understand that citizenship has a legal underpinning, which is not unfolding in the EU yet, then we can get close to anything that we could call European citizenship. What I mean here is that citizenship is not about identity and citizenship is not about culture. What I mean is that citizenship means be equal in front of the law. Citizenship in the normative underpinning, if you come from Rosan Vallon or the Marcel Mauss, who give you definitions of what citizenship is, it is institutionalized solidarity and it is equality in front of the law. We do have that in social and in political philosophy. It means essentially no taxation without representation. It means one person, one vote, and it means equality in front of the law, meaning voting equality, taxation equality for all European citizens, and same access to social rights. These are the three things we should go for having equal, and then, and only then, we could speak of something which would come real as a European citizenship. In today's Europe, we were promised with the Maastricht Treaty that we are union of states and union of citizens. Actually, we are not union of citizens because we have four freedoms: capital, movement, capital, goods, persons, and services. Yeah. And imagine that goods, services, and capital are equal in front of the law in the legal community of the EU. And the only ones who are not equal in front of the law within the EU are us as European citizens, because we are all fragmented in our national legal containers. And it means that we do not vote the same way the European Parliament. It means that we have not the same taxation on our civil sides, which is income taxation. And it means that we do not have the same access to social rights. And only because of that, we could allow the chauvinist discussions we had during the Euro crisis. And the Germans could tell to the Greeks they are lazy and going to retirement at age 50. And the Germans, always the victims of everything, could say we are working for everybody and so on and so forth. But it has much to do with us as citizens being not equal in front of the law. And we need to understand that that should be, is my last sentence, the battle for Europe in the 21st century, because what we did in the last century is one market and one currency, and that is super good, and we should keep it. But if we could do €1, which was nothing else than a legal convergence of our currencies, we should be able to strive for legal convergence of citizens' rights, and that would mean one European social security number in, say, 15 years. The law gave it 10 years, 1992 to 2002, to converge the legal currencies, to give it €1. If we do now €1, one IBAN number, one social security number for all European citizens, we would be equal in front of the law. And then, and only then, we could build a European Parliament which complies with the most ancient thinkings, which is that people needs to be right for those who enter a democracy. We need to be equal if we want to have one European democracy. So that is my claim: one market, one currency, one European democracy depends on equality, on legal equality for the European citizens, and then we would form a citizens' community. And we could, that's my talk, basically build a republic, because European Republic means essentially that we enter a political project in which we agree on being equal in front of the law beyond our national origin. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ulrike, that's a very inspiring and aspirational message. With the elections to the European Parliament coming up, with the change in the European Commission coming up next year as well, do you think we're anywhere near achieving any of these very valuable insights that you provided on legal convergence, European citizenship, etc.? Do you think we're anywhere near creating this kind of a union of European citizens, in a sense?
Look, I need to say I was really disappointed when the vote for the transnational list on 7th of February did not unfold.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to see that the split is in every party. Yeah, obviously the right parties vote more against it than the, say, progressive parties, but the split is in every party. So there is a cleavage in all parties, whether we want Europe or we don't. So there is a bigot European talk here. Yeah, I think we are obviously not yet there, but remember that in 1970, when Mr. Werner put the plan of €1 on the table, he was laughed at. He was just laughed at. And we needed 20 9 years, 89, 92, 22 years, to basically make a treaty out of it, and we call it the Maastricht Treaty. So we need to give it time. But what I'm profoundly convinced about, and Juncker, which you had in the video, basically said it, we should strive for equal citizen rights on the social side here, yeah? My real point is, what we need to remember is the gift that Jacques Delors gave us. Nothing happens that is not getting into a legalized process. Right. Meaning, the single market was the process of law harmonization for goods. Right. The currency union was the legal harmonization for the currency. If we want social rights for the citizens and we want equal law equality for European citizens, we will need to legalize that. So we will need to do a treaty in which we say, in 2 years we make a treaty and we say, we give it 15 years, but by 1st of January 2030, we want to converge social rights for European citizens and we want to make them equal. Everything we do which is not going into a process of legal harmonization will not unfold. I think that is the gift and the message that the law left us, and perhaps it's time to remember and to acquire this not only for goods and for capital and for currencies, but also for the citizens.
Thank you indeed very, very much. Monsieur Georges Dassis, going to turn to you now. You're in charge of a body that has a focus on social issues, the Economic and Social Committee of the European Union. What is your opinion about the different values enunciated there? Are they being implemented? Is your body really doing these things? The social rights, the social values, the social principles? What is your viewpoint?
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Permettez-moi d'abord de remercier Madame O Reilly de m'avoir invité à participer à cette conférence et la féliciter pour avoir choisi le thème « Le futur de l'Europe ». Avec Madame O Reilly, on a eu un débat très intéressant en séance plénière de notre comité qui est composé de 350 membres représentant toutes les organisations représentatives des employeurs, des travailleurs salariés, plus un très grand nombre d'associations représentatives dans divers domaines de la société. Permettez-moi d'abord aussi de saluer le combat des femmes. Nous sommes le 8 mars. Et hier au comité, on a organisé une conférence justement pour célébrer les victoires et aussi souligner la nécessité de continuer ce combat, mais pas seulement les femmes seules, mais les hommes doivent participer à ce combat. Alors, madame, sur votre question, je crois que je pourrais très bien m'entendre avec madame Guérot. Avoir une carte de sécurité sociale pour tous les citoyens, c'est un pas qu'il faut franchir. Mais je crains que ce pas, il faudra encore longtemps. Et pour avoir le temps, il faut que cette union continue à exister. Si nous parlons du futur, et je crains que beaucoup de décideurs, Mme O Reilly a dit tout à l'heure, en parlant d'un homme politique haut placé, j'imagine, il a dit « je peux influencer, je ne peux pas décider ». Non, le gouvernement décide dans cette union. D'ailleurs, c'est une union d'États. L'organe législatif premier de cette union, c'est le Conseil des ministres. Et le Parlement européen, grâce d'ailleurs à l'action de la société civile, représentée pas seulement par le Comité économique et social, mais par d'autres associations, le Parlement européen peut co-décider. Et je crains donc que beaucoup d'hommes politiques et de femmes ne se rendent pas compte de ce qu'il faut faire parce qu'ils ignorent ou ils n'ont pas le temps de s'informer de tous les trajets que cette union a eu depuis 1950. Je crains qu'ils ne se rendent pas compte que si cette union a été attrayante, et les faits sont là pour le prouver, jusqu'en 2008, jusqu'au début de la crise en fait, elle a été attrayante parce qu'il y avait des raisons concrètes pour les citoyens. Il y avait d'abord la paix. Mais malheureusement, aujourd'hui, les jeunes, tant mieux, ils n'ont pas connu d'hier. Même les gens de ma génération, je suis déjà vieux, Je suis né pendant la guerre civile grecque, mais je n'ai pas vraiment connu la guerre, sauf le malheur d'une guerre civile, en tant que petit enfant. Ils croient que la paix est venue du ciel. C'est faux. Si on a la paix dans ce continent, on l'a parce que cette union a existé. Et il ne faut pas rester dans une logique de naïveté et dire que les malheurs, c'est pour les autres. Non. Les malheurs peuvent arriver sur ce continent et je crains que les jeunes ne le savent pas. Il y a plusieurs raisons. Et une des raisons pour moi, c'est qu'il n'y a pas un enseignement. On n'enseigne pas un cours d'histoire européenne dans toutes les écoles de l'Union européenne. Deuxième fait important. Dès 1957, au traité de Rome, il y a eu un principe qui a été annoncé de manière peut-être pas contraignante, mais politiquement importante. Cette communauté, est écrite dans le préambule, cherche l'harmonisation dans les progrès. Et qu'est-ce qu'on a vu? Avec la directive service il y a un peu plus de 10 ans, on a tenté de faire l'harmonisation vers le bas. Mais il est normal que les citoyens ne puissent pas accepter une telle évolution. Et puis, la cohésion économique et sociale a été aussi dans les chefs des hommes et des femmes politiques des années 50 et même 60. Et il y a eu tout le temps des instruments qui garantissaient un niveau acceptable de cohésion économique et sociale. Et les 10 ans de présidence de la Commission par Jacques Delors, je pourrais dire que c'était les 10 ans dorés. Parce qu'il y a eu toute une série de mesures qui visaient justement à garantir cette cohésion. Pas diminuer les niveaux de ceux qui se portaient mieux, mais élever les niveaux des régions qui se portaient plus mal. Et là, je peux faire un reproche, parce que j'ai encore dans mes oreilles les discours des années 80, lorsque le dialogue social a été lancé aussi, proprement dit, les discours de Jacques Delors, qui disait vrai, je pense. La dimension économique sera en parallèle avec la dimension sociale. Et on est loin du compte. On est loin du compte, pour vous donner un exemple très récent. Une jeune citoyenne française handicapée est venue faire un stage au sein de notre comité. Elle avait besoin de services prévus pour les handicapés. Elle ne pouvait pas bénéficier parce que c'était une citoyenne française non domiciliée de manière permanente en Belgique. Comment est-ce possible? D'ailleurs, je compte agir auprès des autorités belges. Mais vous donnez des autres exemples. Avec la crise, la solidarité. La solidarité, ça a été un des fondements de cette union. Les pères fondateurs, qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait? Ils ont dit, je pense, il vaut mieux commencer à résoudre nos différends à travers un dialogue plutôt que par les canons, comme ça a été fait jusqu'en 1940. Et la solidarité doit être au centre. En 2010, on a vu que c'était chacun pour soi. Et même, on a vu des choses graves que je suis très fier de présider cette institution parce que nous étions le premier à dénoncer ces manques de solidarité et à dire clairement qu'il n'est pas normal que des pays qui se portent très bien du point de vue économique s'enrichissent sur le dos des pays qui étaient en faillite. Parce que quand on dit pays, il faut voir la population derrière. Donc, pour ne pas être trop long, j'insiste, chaque fois je dis, les décideurs doivent voir ce que nous avons traversé. Nous, citoyens actifs, nous devons informer les jeunes et les moins jeunes sur tous les biens que cette union a apportés. Et malheureusement, on ne le dit pas assez. Et en même temps, crier assez fort avec des propositions concrètes afin que cette union devienne vraiment une union européenne, une union pour les citoyens qui vivent sur tous les territoires. Et quand je dis citoyens, je ne suis pas comme les Athéniens il y a 25 siècles. J'entends tous les citoyens qui vivent sur le territoire, indépendamment de leur nationalité. Voilà, ne pas faire trop long.
No, thank you very much. So it's a pessimistic assessment, if I'm correct, Mr. Dassis. You've also mentioned the race to the bottom, and you've mentioned that, you know, we are working on the markets, the financial markets, the services, the goods, but not on the people. A message actually very similar to what Ulrike was saying, and it's interesting, the name of Jacques Delors keeps coming up over and over again. You also talked about solidarity, or the lack of solidarity. And the word citizens keeps coming up as well. So I'm going to turn now to the Ombudsman, who are actually in direct contact with citizens. And do you, start with you, Reinier, in the Netherlands, what are the kinds of issues that the citizens bring to you? What are the kinds of issues as an Ombudsman that you have to deal with? And do they connect with the kind of messages you're getting from Ulrike and George Dassis as well?
First idea that comes to my head is yes, because the ideas do not belong to a set of laws. It doesn't belong to the Dutch laws or to the European laws or the English laws or the Belgian laws. It's about citizens, people in my country living there, not necessarily nationals, but people living there who come across administrations, maladministration, problems, impropriety, whatever, and they come to us. And for good reasons. I would like to add that if you want to know what is really going on, it's not only sit back and wait till they come to you, you have to go out and try and find out what's going on there. And if I come to the idea of the social rights, I think it's very wise that we put it on our agenda again, but in essence it was there since 1957. And it grew and it got more dimensions, and I remember very well coming back to the Netherlands in 1992 after spending a few years in the court in Luxembourg, and we just had a treaty. And all the judges, I used to be a judge at the time, all the judges said, oh, what's going to happen? Oh, what's going to happen? And now they're far more familiar with what's going on in Europe. So we need also time. And I think for us, Ombudsmen, it's now time to say, oh, what's going on in Europe? Oh, what's going on in Europe? Let's work together. Because there is so many things that is coming now across our tables. I saw on the IOI side the meeting of the Austrian Ombudsman with Mrs. Sabatova on certain problems of cross-border workers or residents. We have been in contact with our Belgian colleagues on the federal level on social benefits. I came across problems with taxation in Belgium and the Netherlands, where legislation was not really compatible. And I discussed it with my state secretary, and last week there was a letter to these people that things are now arranged. So it comes to us, and we have to go out there. What people do need us? And that is also there, I think, at least in my view, there is no difference between when I'm working within the context of my own country or in the broader context of Europe, or even wider. You were talking about the social security number. This is also to do something with digitalization. This has to do with elderly people who must be able to use it. We are talking about systems, and we are talking about contradictions between systems and the needs of the people. So there is something. We have to take care of our elderly people. We have to take care of our students. This morning in the Dutch newspapers there was that we have the highest number this year of young students coming from Romania and Bulgaria to my country to do their studies. Why do we not get any complaints from them? Because I'm sure they're in some kind of trouble when it comes to benefits, allowances, etc., 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 social security insurances. So yes, there is a huge number of problems we are more or less aware of, and we can find out more and where we can cooperate. And I would like to refer to something Emily has been doing with some of our colleagues here when it came to Frontex, where we were cooperating together. What's going on our borders? What do we think of that regulation? Where should be the amelioration in that regulation when it comes to the human rights protection and the etc., etc. So there it is. So on the one hand side, I won't make political statements, probably one. I'm not a part of the bad weather coalition, as it's called. I don't know if everybody heard about that. It's Finland and Netherlands and the Baltic states, and they call it the bad weather because we have such a lot of rain. I do not believe in making parties or groups within the European Union when it comes to ombudsmen. We are confronted together with the same sort of problems. Might be in my country in a sort of different way than in, for example, Poland, But when it comes to the problems of police truck drivers, Adam and I should work that out together. And we should take as a part of departure the perspective of that citizen. And the citizen in the sense of the European treaties. There is citizenship created. It should be used also by the Ombudsman. That's my view on what we are going to do in the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to citizenship and our contribution to make it better work.
Right. Can I just ask you a quick follow-up? So in the Netherlands, as in many other countries, there is a Eurosceptic sort of wave coming in as well. Do you think if we focused more on the social dimension of Europe, that would stem it, that it would stop that wave, that it's linked to the fact that people don't see the social benefits of being part of a European Union? They just see the commerce, the trade, the finance.
Yeah, also there's a parallel between the European dimension and the national dimension. I always say the people that need me most are some of them are part of these populist groups. They depend upon benefits and they feel set back because other ones get those benefits and they do not, although they are entitled. So we must be very careful by saying that there is populist and there is socialist and there is liberals and there is illiberals or whatever there is people. And yes, some people have views on what's going on in society, but those who needed our efforts most are probably not the ones we would invite for dinner.
Okay. Did you want to come in, Emily, at this point? No. Okay. So I'll turn to Andreas. So Andreas, Greece has been, let's say, suffering from quite a lot of financial issues. You've also had a wave of immigration. The latest stories are that this is going to start again in summer. There's been a bit of a lull at the moment. What are the kinds of issues, I think it's on, Andreas, yes. What are the kinds of issues that you have to deal with when you're dealing with the population, with the citizens, the people?
Yes, it's great to be back. Last year we were discussing, or I was at least involved in a discussion that had to do with migration and refugee, the handling of the migration and refugee situation, especially in the Mediterranean. This year I understand that I will be touching upon a different issue, equally problematic, if not more problematic for my country as well, at least. I have had the opportunity of actually expressing and describing the situation in Greece as a crisis within a crisis. So we are facing two crises at the same time, one being the fiscal one that has been allowed to develop into a financial one, an economic one, a social one, even a humanitarian one, and the other one being obviously the inability, or at least lack of sufficient means of actually addressing the problems caused by the influx of mixed flows since 2015 at least. Before I address your question, I would like to make a very quick comments on what has already been said. And I would like to focus on a couple of key points and key words and key notions. First, populism, that was mentioned earlier. I don't think that it takes a lot of contemplation to understand that the populism and sort of populist rhetoric, we were discussing it last year, becomes popular in periods of crisis, especially in periods of crisis. I think this is something that, at least in Europe, we have not really understood exactly what it means and how we should be treating it. Already there are so-called populist parties that are either claiming to take power in a number of member states or perhaps are already in power in a number of member states. I think that what we fail perhaps to recognize and to realize is that such populist rhetoric, at least in political terms, becomes popular and attracts the vote because people feel alienated from the political debate as it is being conducted at the moment. The priorities set. So if I were to somehow rephrase or reconsider the topic of our morning discussion, I think what is missing from the political and social debate at the moment in Europe is to talk about the present of Europe, not the future of Europe. I think the problems that we have to deal with are present, and we have to deal with them right now. I mention this because I think
Can you hold your microphone?
Yes, I mention this because I think that in the, at least in the process of the European integration project, Europe, the European Union, has always tried to have a central, sort of focal issue, a theme that would draw all member states and the ones who are aspiring to become member states towards a new development. It was in the 90s, the Maastricht Agreement, the Maastricht Treaty, the prospect of a European Economic and Monetary Union, etc. It was in the early stages of this century, the enlargement process that eventually, at some point materialized, and we have now a much larger Europe. Since the completion of the enlargement project, I believe that Europe has failed to come up with a new theme that would draw the attention of everyone, that would perhaps even enhance the solidarity among member states. What has happened is that it has had to fight, it has had to show its sort of the way that it was going to address a number of crises. One being the fiscal crisis that, again, at the pan-European level was allowed to evolve into an economic crisis, a financial and economic crisis, and then a social crisis, and also the migration and refugee crisis. On both these crises, I think the European Union has failed to produce adequate sort of means to address them. And this has been somehow, this is something that people have realized.
Okay. Yes, Andreas, can I just ask you one thing? So you talked very interesting. You said new theme.
Yes.
What, in your view, would be this?
And so, turning to the topic and to your question, I wish the new theme would be a socially inclusive Europe. I heard about the taxation equality, which is absolutely essential if we are going to have a socially inclusive and socially fair Europe. But this also necessitates, this also requires having the equality of accessing the produce of growth created within Europe. Because at the moment, I was discussing this just before we started with the European Ombudsman. I was just browsing the most recent report on the Commission semester findings, the winter findings. And it seems that there is a lot of growth that is taking place in most of the EU member states. I mean, in some member states, there is an annual growth of more than 5%. There are low levels, low percentages of unemployment, roughly 7% within the European Union zone. But this is not necessarily the case in all member states. There are a lot of differences, and I think the distance between the core, let's say, and the periphery of Europe is getting bigger rather than being somehow treated differently. So I feel that we're a long way from actually building up this theme that can also be a theme that can resonate with the people. Just one final point, which relates also to the social inclusiveness of Europe. And because we are celebrating the Women's Day. A couple of years ago, the European Court of Justice issued a judgment, a ruling, which basically allowed the collective dismissal of pregnant women And this is now has become jurisprudence. This has been now adopted by national Supreme Courts and so on and so forth. And this has been incorporated into the way that we are interpreting not only EU legislation, no, but also our national legislation, because they are clearly linked. In my country, a number of labor rights and social rights are being somehow undermined, and especially EU laws are being undermined. But this is done without, not only without the sort of interference of the European Union institutions, but on the contrary, with their blessing. So I think that there are a lot of things that we need to discuss for the present situation and the present state of affairs in Europe before we enter the debate about what the future holds for us.
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you very much for making some very powerful points. The new theme, which you said, I think perhaps will resonate also here, is a socially inclusive Europe, and that laws are being undermined today. So instead of looking at the future at the moment, we should actually be looking at all the difficulties and challenges we face in the present, which brings me to Adam, the Polish ombudsman. Your country is being challenged, is challenging itself on a number of basic principles of the European Union, rule of law, among others. So how difficult does that make your work, Adam?
So you're right that Poland seems to be like a problematic country last years. And especially, when I look into the title of this session today, Future of the EU, what kind of Europe? My big question is, what is Polish presence in this future Europe, and how the situation in my country will develop, especially with respect to the rule of law. But not only, it is not just a question of Article 7 procedure, but also challenging some values of European integration, some values, some constitutional values which are expressed in our constitution, and also the question about whether, if we are on a certain road, and some people say it is the road towards illiberal democracy, if any notion like this exists, whether we can at all use the frame of illiberal in connection with democracy. So what is the end of this road, also in the context of the European integration? And certainly, if we talk about, and it is discussion of this panel, okay, so what may bring citizens together, what may build common European citizenship? There were those discussions, I remember, from the doctrine of so-called EU social citizenship, so it seems that we are coming back to these ideas. My problem is that we do not have that kind of debate in Poland at all. Because right now, the only topic, in fact, which is discussed is whether Poland at a certain point should join the Eurozone. But basically, the discussion about future of Europe is not taking place in Poland, because we are all the time subject of pressure, all different violations concerning rule of law framework. And at the same time, opposition parties do not have, it seems, enough energy to start something else, something like, let's say, like the pro-European discourse in Poland. And especially if we take into account the issue of social rights, we should think that social rights could be implemented at the European level, but they are mostly implemented at the domestic level. Why? Because it is a question of money. So if we, let's say, think about social security, the lowest retirement pension in Poland is about 250 euros per month. 250 euros. So you have to survive for 250 euros, and a massive part of the Polish population is living out of this 250 euros. And if I'm asked questions, and I travel a lot around Poland, so why our retirement benefits are so low in a situation when we worked through the whole our life, I answer, our GDP is basically much lower than Germany, Norway, other countries. So without a GDP higher, without our economic increase, we will not have higher retirement pensions because the system is constructed in a way that all those pensions are sponsored every year from the state budget. There are no, some big savings in our budget. And what is striking in Poland is that if you compare the situation and approach towards social rights these days to the situation, let's say 2013-14 with the previous government, you see a huge investment of energy, power into social rights and money also. So like the landmark example is the program so-called 500+, which means that the government is giving, we are all giving 120 euros per month to the family which is having every second, third, fourth child. So if you have, let's say, 4 children, you can get more or less 400 euros per month, just net from the state budget. And it is an extremely important program. It is also subject of some criticism, but it is important from the point of view of raising the dignity of the people, especially at those, as you said, peripheries of Europe. So if you are coming from the small village, small town, where all the people around have the retirement benefits between 250, 500 euros, and if you are, and if the minimum salary per month is more or less 600 euros, right. Then if you get such a money from budget, it really increases increases the popularity of the government and the support for that kind of policies. The same was with the minimum wage. Mm-hmm. The same was that we have a deep discussion on the need to develop social housing. So why I'm saying this, not to promote government, but to say that if you put on the other side democratic values like independence of institutions, mm-hmm. rule of law, independence of courts, all those things seem to be abstract in comparison to social benefits you receive every month. The problem is that if you construe such benefits in a very, I would say, wide way, just by giving to everybody, by not looking into details, then you are ending up that, first of all, you do not have enough money for all of this. Second, you end up with ignoring different, I would say, minority groups that should have also access to some social benefits, but because there is no money and there are no independent courts, it is extremely difficult for them to fight right. for those rights. And here is basically, to a great extent, my role, because in a number of cases, I take issues of some access to social benefits, which are basically not implemented despite the fact that they should be implemented. So, for example, there is one group of retired persons who were born in 1953, and because of all different problems in legislation, they get a retirement which is much lower than anybody else from the age 1954, let's say. So what I'm saying is that without independent courts, without independent institutions like Constitutional Court, it is extremely difficult to fight for those rights. Right. Because you are at the mercy of the parliament, of the parliamentary majority, whoever at certain point it decides, yes, we invest into this. So in my opinion, what I'm trying to say is that it is extremely important to combine social rights with access to remedies, with independence of courts, with like a real availability right. of things that, of remedies to citizens.
So one can't be there without the other. You need the two together.
Exactly.
Right. So does that make your life very, very difficult? When does your life, your job become more difficult in this situation?
It is difficult from the very beginning of my term, because I try to be as much independent as possible, and I'm not necessarily following everything what the government would like me to follow. I defend rights, so this life is not easy. But I would like to say that for our institutions, I don't know whether it is the experience of my friends, ombudspersons, is that if you take social rights in an active way, it could also give you a benefit for the institution, because you make something like a diversification of risks. That you can take some cases that could be very much controversial, But when you are taking social rights, you are always helping people.
Right.
You are always on the side of the people. You are not in the middle of some political storm concerning some specific human rights, especially those related to equality. So if you have number of issues with social rights, you can sometimes say, listen, I'm in favor of the majority in the society. I'm not the guy who is basically going to divide you all. So from that point of view, it is quite a useful thing to deal effectively with social rights.
That's a good insight, and I guess in a sense good advice as well. Before I open the floor, I would like to just a very quick comment from Ulrike and then from you, Emily, as well. But Ulrike, something that Adam said, that there's no pro-EU discussion going on in Poland. You initially implied that there was. Are we missing something here?
First, I'd like to say that if you give incentives to women to having more children instead of working, you will get a different society. And I think we should not overlook the systemic feature of that policy, which is that in 3 years from now, you will have more children in Poland and less women working and less discussion about free Europe, yeah? So there's a systemic factor. And I'm not criticizing, because I'd like to give you a quote from Marine Le Pen, and actually she's right. Marine Le Pen, in her campaign, said on every given marketplace in France, quand il n'aura plus la nation, qui s'occupera des pauvres? When there is no more nation, who is going to occupy of the poor? So that is it. So there's a binary choice for Europe. Either Europe goes social and goes social in a much more bigger way than it is today, or it will do what the Poles do, and rightly so, we shall say. Because what you can say against for having a huge sort of Kindergeld for a Polish child? There's nothing to argue against. So Europe goes social, or we will see the social things in national governments. I come from Germany. I can say what it means when politics goes national social. Yeah? And if we don't fill that gap, that we do all the other whatever institutional politics, but we do not fill the social side, I think we have lost. Right. And that is a very important point, and it brings me back to the combination we are figuring out between citizens, sovereignty, nations, and so on and so forth. I give you the definition of Marcel Mauss, who's a French sociologue, and who wrote in the 1920s, because he saw coming what came by then, that a nation is nothing else than institutionalized solidarity. So if our Greek colleague here on the panel argued that from ECOSOC, we were arguing that there was not so much solidarity in the Greek crisis, because solidarity was basically a random choice, basically of the German government. We give a bailout or we don't give a bailout, yeah? Sort of. So that was the middle of the democratic deficit, that we had a choice. But what makes a nation is institutionalized solidarity, and that is a legal process that nothing drops out by choice in a given difficult situation. So if we take it that way, and we could make an intelligent combination between citizens, sovereignty, rights, the social, we just need to rediscover the writings of Marcel Mauss, which is we create a system of institutionalized solidarity, which could be a European social system where nobody drops out on a given vote. Right. And then we were to be, in that definition, a European nation in which citizens, all European citizens, are equal in front of the law, and we have a full-fledged democracy. That was just a big circle to say that I think we are wrong in criticizing the so-called populists, because let's remember that politics is always about the populace. It's good to care for the populace. Populism actually is good, if you read the ancient writings, because it's the task of politics to care for the populace. So I think we should basically take what the populists are detecting in our societies, which is they need care, and so Europe should care.
Right. Emily, so binary choice, either Europe goes social or becomes more socially conservative, basically, is the message.
I was quite taken by the way that Adam, when he was talking about democratic values, and a phrase that he said, the democratic values on the other side, you know, pointing out that the lack of alignment between social inclusion policies and what are perceived as democratic values. And the irony is, I think, as you have highlighted, on the one hand, from the view from Brussels of the Polish government would be a negative one in relation to rule of law issues and all of that, and yet for a great number of the people who live in Poland, it's a positive one for the reasons that you have outlined. So in a sense, what the social pillar is trying to do is to align the democratic values of the EU with social inclusion policies. The degree to which that can be done, short of making it a legal instrument, is contested, as we know. But I think there's another issue here, and just listening to the speakers talking about citizens and democracy and all of that. And sometimes when we look across the EU and we see the problems that are there, which we're all familiar with, and we wonder, well, how did that happen? And sometimes things happen because of member states' actions or inactions, sometimes because of EU actions or inactions. But sometimes important decisions are being made that citizens don't have a role in at all, at a very high political level. And just this morning I was reading in the Financial Times about the speculation about the next president of the European Central Bank. I mean, a very crucial role. We saw how critical the ECB was and Mario Draghi's particular leadership in relation to the economic crisis. A German has been proposed. It's expected that he may become president, and then there are issues around that in terms of whether he's a hawk or a dove. But that is a crucial appointment for a lot of us in the EU that none of us are really going to have a role in as citizens. Equally, the next president of the Commission, I mean, we have this Spitzenkandidaten process that happened the last time out. It'll probably happen next time out, but there does still seem to be a distance between citizen decision-making or direct involvement in that and the outcome. Also, what's going to happen we now have a new government in Germany, the relationship between Madame Merkel and Mr. Macron, President Macron in France, and he has very strong views about the future of Europe. So to what extent as citizens can we involve ourselves in that? So in other words, there's an awful lot going on at a high political level that is not visible really to us, or even if it is visible, we don't feel that our input is really there. We're impotent in a lot of these cases. So in relation to my own work as European Ombudsman, a lot of the work that I do doesn't actually have to do with the bread and butter issues of people's lives, because they tend to be the competencies of the member states, and so it's my colleague ombudsmen who are taking care of that. But one of the things we have been doing, and is probably the most challenging work that I've done, is opening up some of those political processes to view, and particularly the role of the Council. And the Council is your ministers and my ministers from Ireland or Greece or Germany or Spain who come to Brussels and make the laws that affect us all. And that the Council has been described as the black box of the EU institutions. It's very hard to see into it. It's transparent to a point, but if you try to see how, the position that Germany took, the position that Greece, that Poland, that Ireland, that any of the member states took in relation to a regulation or a law that is going to impact on all of us in many areas of our lives, including many of the ones we're talking about here, then it is very difficult. So what I have been doing, and this has been challenging work, because at times it seemed to be entering into the political arena, which it isn't, because quite simply under the EU treaties, people have a right for their lawmaking to be made visible to them. But that is a challenging piece of work. But it's my view that the more that these processes, whether it's the way in which the ECB president is chosen, or the president of the Commission, or the decisions that our lawmakers at EU level make, the more that they are made more transparent and intelligible as well to people, then the more we can really engage in these things, rather than have a situation which in many areas we have now, where we look at something that has emerged and we wonder, how did that happen? And it happened because political choices were made, and very often political choices that we did not have as citizens a direct involvement in.
Yes.
I think that is a very powerful statement. And just one sentence. I think we need to be aware of the fact that we had a strong economic driver for making the single market. There were the industries behind because they won a lot of money. We had strong economic driver to make the currency union, the banks, because they wanted it and it gave them a lot of benefit. We have no economic driver for European democracy. It will need to be an emancipatory project because in an efficiency paradigm, there's no interest in it. Yeah? And that is the difference. That is the real difference that if we reason one market, one currency, one democracy, there's no economic driver for one democracy.
Thank you very much. So on that note, let's open the floor to questions and comments from yourselves. Under the rules of the game, just please identify yourself very, very briefly. And if there's a question to a specific panelist, please say so as well. Sir, please keep your hand up. So we see. Yeah.
Hello. Excuse me. My name's David Price. I'm a journalist for Your Democracy. And I've written books on Schuman and the origin, purpose, and future of the European democracy process. Responding a little bit to the last comments and what Ombudsman O'Reilly said at the beginning, that rights are not enforced because citizens don't know they have them. I want to raise the question of one of the greatest scandals in the European Union, one which has been going on for more than 60 years. Before I get to that, I'll give you an example of what's happening. President Trump made proposals on steel. The Commission admitted this will have huge impact on workers around Europe and also, obviously, a lot of other sectors. So on Tuesday, the President of the Commission, Mr. Juncker, had a private meeting with Mr. Mittal, who's the chief of the biggest steel production in the world, not just Europe. Did he have any representatives of the workers there? Did he have any representatives of the consumers there? No, he had a private meeting with the biggest steel producer, bigger than any Chinese or American steel producer, a producer which had been fined for fixing prices, hundreds of millions of euros. So the crux of that is that in the treaties, the Commission is supposed to be an honest broker and act honestly and should always have a dialogue with the Consultative Committee, which in this case is the Economic and Social Committee. So I'm wondering whether the Economic and Social Committee are going to take some action about this, and they have powers to take things to court if they wish to, because if a proposal comes from the Commission, how are we to know that the Commission's not been, let's say, nobbled or biased by this process?
David, do you have another?
Yes, secondarily, I would like to ask the other members of the panel that the Founding Fathers said the Economic and Social Committee should be able to elect itself, as the European Parliament did from the 1970s on. How can the Ombudsman around Europe encourage this process, which is in the treaties, so that the Economic and Social Committee can be directly elected from associations of workers, entrepreneurs, and consumers?
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Let's go to the panel for a response. Mr. Dassis, would you like to start off in responding to what David has asked about this meeting and steel?
Le Comité économique et social est un organe politique. Il ne peut pas porter plainte au sens juridique du terme contre la Commission ou contre toute autre institution ou personne physique, mais le comité peut intervenir à travers ses avis qui font l'objet d'un débat à différents niveaux, et le stade ultime, c'est l'Assemblée plénière composée, comme je l'ai dit, de 350 membres. Maintenant, un commentaire personnel, je ne vois pas de mal à ce que le président de la Commission puisse rencontrer qui il veut. Ce qui m'intéresse, c'est de savoir quelle est la position de l'Union européenne en matière de réponse aux mesures annoncées par le président Trump et attendre une décision du Conseil, parce que la Commission ne décide pas. Elle a le droit de proposer, attendre quelle sera la position du Conseil. Je répète, dans notre union, l'institution législative première, c'est le Conseil. Évidemment, notre comité a le droit d'initiative. Je ne peux pas m'engager, je ne suis que le président, je ne suis pas un dictateur. Les instances vont sans doute décider, probablement la semaine prochaine, d'une réaction à travers un avis d'initiative que nous pourrions élaborer dans les mois à venir. Maintenant, concernant l'élection des membres directement, ça serait une bonne chose. Mais il ne faut pas sous-estimer la dimension démocratie participative représentée par le Comité économique et social européen. Je ne sais pas si je me suis fait bien comprendre. Chacun des 350 membres représente une association représentative. Au niveau des travailleurs salariés et des entreprises, des employeurs, il n'y a aucune contestation possible. Toutes les organisations représentatives des partenaires sociaux sont présentes au comité. Donc, toutes ces personnes, hommes et femmes, ont un mandat, doivent rendre compte à leurs organisations et aux groupes sociaux qui les représentent lorsqu'ils prennent position sur telle ou telle autre question. Le troisième groupe qui s'appelle chez nous les groupes des intérêts divers, ce sont des associations représentatives pour la plupart, mais je dois dire clairement que, en général, le gouvernement qui nomme les représentants au niveau du Conseil ont le loisir de choisir telle ou telle autre association. Des problèmes ont existé, bien sûr, mais évidemment, les associations représentatives qui ont une possibilité de mobilisation des citoyens, je pense qu'elles ont toujours eu gain de cause. Ouais. Sur les aspects pratiques, organiser une élection au suffrage universel pour les membres du comité, je ne vois pas pratiquement comment cela pourrait se faire. Mais si c'est réalisable, pourquoi pas?
Okay. David, you got your answer. I was wondering, would any of the ombudsmen want to come in on this issue about direct elections to the Economic and Social Committee? Okay. Emily, do you want to come in on the first question about the meeting with no workers or consumer representatives there? Microphone? Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, obviously you're giving me that information now. I mean, what we've done a lot of work on over the last number of years, indeed my predecessor as well, was on the transparency of these meetings. And the Commission at the beginning of its mandate made changes to its transparency rules so that meetings with the President, with the Cabinet or with the Secretary General of the Commission, they have to be publicly noted, put on the record. The content of those meetings is different, obviously, and even though it has been a good start, I think it can be difficult to know how informative even putting those on the record are, because if somebody is meeting with, let's say, Google about Europe, that could be anything. It depends how high up in Google and precisely what about Europe. But another piece of the work that we have done has been about balanced representation, or that there is a balance in terms of the interest groups that are meeting with the Commission and others. We've done this in relation to expert groups as well, but we're also doing it in relation to the Brexit negotiations, and that asking Mr. Barnier to make sure that all of his meetings are out there publicly. And then I suppose it's for other actors to make of that what they will if they feel that there isn't adequate representation or so on. I suppose the role that I can play is to make these things transparent, and after that civil society and political actors have to play their role. Of course, we've also recently asked for Council President Tusk to also make his stakeholder meetings visible and public as well, because it's critical, and this goes back to the points that I was making earlier. For us to be able to interact at all, we need to know what's going on. And that's why it's so important that, certainly in relation to the Council, that we need to know what member states, what positions they're taking, so that can be debated at home or on a EU level, but also who is influencing the laws that are being made. And that is very important, because any law that emerges, any regulation, is essentially the net outcome of the influences that have been brought to bear on it all along the way. And it's very important that we see those influences all along the way.
Thank you. Reinier, you did want to come in?
Yeah, just a few words, not on this topic, or probably just a little bit, because I think it's very good that people understand that the mandate, at least as I have it, is not to make comments on the laws or on the general policies. I always have to bring a good case.
Yes.
And in that way, I can from time to time make comments on the laws or how it works out and on the general policies. If I'm going to make statements, more or less political statements, it would harm my position. Not my personal position, but the position of the Ombudsman within the framework of the Dutch Constitution or the European framework or whatever it is. So yes, I have my opinions, and if I hear the question, I have my thoughts, but I will not express them as an Ombudsman, and probably even nowhere, because it could harm my position. And what we are looking for, and I just, one sentence on what Adam said, if we would like to make changes, we have to go and look for the right cases. And there I would like to make a comparison to what happened, let's say, in the jurisprudence and the court cases of the court in Luxembourg. We needed the Barber case or the Emmet case or Frankovic and Bonifaci or Costa Enel. So we are in a very luxury position that we can pick out those cases ourselves. So my suggestion is that European Union Ombudsman, this network, sits together and say, what is now necessary? On what topics do we prioritize? What is for the next, the item Andreas mentioned, what is our challenge for the next 5 years? And then we go and look for the cases and we identify the topics and we make our cases and we bring our reports. And if we do that together, then I think we are really working at, well, you know, the future of Europe and the future of the citizens, because it's citizens first. I would say that. That's political. Citizens first.
Thank you very much. Ulrike, please wait.
I give you a very good
Ulrike.
case. My son wanted to do, he is studying at University Lyon, wanted to do an internship at a German bank. And the day he presents himself to start, he was asked his caisse de maladie, and the French one was not accepted by the German bank.
Yeah.
So no internship,
Right.
period. Yeah. No, there was an internship because I intervened and I called the bank and I said, look, you don't want me to go to the European Court because I don't have time. And then he got the internship. But I mean, that should not be the case, right?
Yeah.
So pick that case up and make it big.
Yeah.
And there's one other thing, when there is we have the green books and the white papers and the brown, whatever it is, we could have our influence already there. So we should be part of consultations and we should stress our beautiful, wonderful, exceptional position, and our knowledge can be brought in there.
Very good advice. Emily, do you want to come in? Andreas? Yes? We'll come to you in a second, but this is a very
just
important...
in relation to one way in which we, I think, helped to promote social inclusion within the EU through a particular case we had, which we finished last year, and it concerned interns in the European External Action Agency. And these are generally young people who were taken on by essentially the EU's foreign service all over the world and working for absolutely nothing. No fees, no accommodation allowance, no travel allowance, absolutely nothing. And we got a complaint from a former intern about this, and there was actually no law that would have compelled the European External Action Service to pay the young interns, but we looked at essentially the non-discrimination value of the European Treaty, and we said that this was a case of discrimination in the sense that the young people who were fortunate enough to have their own resources or their mother and their father, their families to pay them, were enabled to get these internships, which are hugely valuable in terms of, you know, a mark on your CV and professional progression. So even those their equally bright peers were not enabled to get this, so it was privilege following privilege. So we put this case to Madame Mogherini and to the Commission, and they accepted it. And subsequently, they put a case to the Council, and the Council allocated a budget, I think it was €1 million for this year to pay the interns, which was, you know, just show that you don't always, even if there isn't a precise law or regulation that has been, you know, offended against, that you can use the higher values that are in, whether it's the social pillar or the treaties themselves or the charter, to drive a case through.
It's about the soft power and the influence you were talking about, really. Yeah. Andreas, did you want to come in on yes, please.
Very quickly, one point. It's something that Reinier mentioned earlier, and I think I would like to sort of highlight it and emphasize it a bit more. He mentioned digitalization. He referred to digitalization and the effect that this has on, in fact, enjoying a number of social rights within our societies, within our countries. And he also mentioned that we need to have a good case, and through a good case, we may be able to change a number of things. I just wanted to mention that, in fact, I think if this is the experience that we've all had. It is very common that our administrations, the administrations that we are supposed to be monitoring and scrutinizing, come up with this very simple and easy sort of explanation as to why things are done in the way that they are done. And normally this is because of the system. The system does not allow us to, does not have other parameters that would allow us to make, say, a pension sort of scheme or a benefits more fair, because the system, the digital system, allows only a number of set parameters. We have dealt with this case, with this topic on a number of issues, and we have managed to already secure changes, amendments, not only in the social security system, but also obviously the tax system in Greece. Because, and in fact, there has been a very interesting case now, just recently, a couple of weeks ago, by the Greek Supreme Court, the Cour de Cassation, which stipulates, this is the crux of the whole sort of case, of the whole judgment, that now, through the digitalization process and the progress within the new technologies, there shouldn't be any sort of limits as to the parameters that the system can have. So no more, such a claim on the part of the administration is no longer acceptable.
Right. Okay, Adam, very quickly, and then I have other questions to take.
Just quickly. I think that waiting for a good case is not always a solution, because sometimes you will not have enough good cases to change the system or in order to promote some values. And I think about here specifically about so-called Stockholm Program that was adopted in the EU a couple of years ago, which was a series of directives strengthening the right of criminal defense. If we look into the case law concerning right to interpretation during giving testimonies, there were not so many cases, but there was enough imagination in the framers to prepare a legislation that is having right now impact on whole Europe. And basically it is something which is strongly connected to this equal EU citizenship. So I think I agree with Reinier that maybe our role as ombudspersons is to seek for some very specific, realistic ideas how to bring a more inclusive Europe. And when I think about those ideas, one of the problems is that sometimes we have a violation or a decrease in standards of social rights protection just due to the European integration. So, for example, one of the values in some countries is so-called intergenerational solidarity, which means that younger take care about all the people in the family. When we open borders, when we create free movement of workers, services, and so on, then this intergenerational solidarity is broken. People are not living with each other. So maybe there's a question how the EU should respond to this. Or the other question, which is, and Poland is suffering because of this problem, is that we have access to right to health in every country, one of the basic social rights. But because in Sweden, Germany, Netherlands, medical doctors and nurses are paid 3 times more than in my country, then we have immigration. And it is quite difficult to stop medical doctors and nurses, because then you would have to violate free movement rules. So you have all those challenges which create specific problems concerning guarantees of certain social rights due to the European integration and possibilities connected with this.
Right. So very, very complex and complicated landscape out there. I had a question from the gentleman over there. Can I see any other hands at this point? Please, sir.
Thank you. I'm Emmanuel Jacob, representing Euromil. Euromil is a military association of military trade unions, professional associations, representing 34 associations from 23 European countries. Well, looking at the title of the discussion, Ensuring an Inclusive and Fair Society for Citizens, and it has been said that equal in front of the law, independent nationality, this brings also equal social rights. Well, unfortunately, I have to tell you that more than 500,000, a million European citizens don't have these rights for the moment. They don't have these rights because they happen to wear a uniform. They don't have these rights because they happen to have a very specific job, being a soldier. And they lose their rights, their human rights. They use their social rights when they enter the barricades, not even when they enter them, when they get close to the barricades. And then I'm not even talking about the fact when they leave active service, thinking about veterans and everything. We still have today in Europe 100,000 of them who nobody is taking care of. What we are doing is that we call on national ombuds institutions, and several we see every year at a meeting organized by DCAF. We see several ombuds institutions and sit together for a few days to discuss these things. We call on national ombuds institutions to make sure that they become competent for military personnel. Not only military personnel, security personnel, because I'm convinced that police officers and other ones in the security world have exactly the same problem than we have. We need independent institutions. We don't need only institutions belonging to the armed forces or to the ministers of defense. We need independent institutions that can investigate in these social and human problems, just like it happens already today in several countries, Ireland, Germany, the Netherlands, and other ones. This should be discussed also on the European level, because our people are not only working today as national soldiers, they are working today as European soldiers, not only protecting national values, protecting European values. That's what they are there for. We believe that same duties ask for same rights, and at the end, we are not more or less than citizens in uniform, so treat them as a real European citizen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Does anyone want to take this issue up? Yes, veteran ombudsman, yes.
As a veterans ombudsman, just a very few words. One of the cases we just dealt with last month or 2 months ago, I think, was somebody, a post-active veteran, who wanted to reallocate from Holland to Germany. The laws prohibited that. We made some recommendations, and I think in the near future it will be possible. And yes, you're right, they need special attention. It is my idea that we should have as little differences between, you know, soldiers, policemen, ordinary civil servants, and normal people like we all here, because the very essence is the citizenship. And that's the point where we should start. And yes, from time to time, there is some special things going on, for example, with military or veterans, but the point where we all have to start for all the people in Europe at the same moment, at the same time, is the citizenship.
But can anything be done to change that situation? that the gentleman has just described?
Yeah. My office is also combining this function of the Ombudsman for military personnel. And I can just say, you know, how difficult it is. Because, first of all, you have just a few persons to deal with this, because the parliament has decided that, okay, so we will not establish any new ombudsperson for military personnel, but basically the general ombudsman will do the job. So you have just a few persons dealing, and you have the 100,000 army in Poland. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that the Polish structure is constructed in a way that there are so-called specific corpses of some, I would say, delegated, trusted military officers within the army that are receiving complaints. But in a situation when the army is very hierarchical and it is also becoming politicized, it is the problem last years, it is extremely difficult for these people to intervene, because if they are in the service and they are receiving complaints, they do not have this natural power to pass those complaints higher. And I think that if there is a discussion in the EU about creating a joint military in some future, or some corpses, joint corpses, I think it is a very good idea to think about how to strengthen those national, not only national institutions, but maybe also to create that kind of institution at the European level in order to take care on what is going on. And it is also, one more point, it is extremely connected with some of the specific values of the European Union. So, for example, one of the biggest problems we have right now is basically, I would name it hashtag #MeToo in the Polish army, okay? Which shows that basically there are no procedures at all. That women who are victims are basically without any guarantees. They can ask different institutions, but there are no internal procedures. And it is one of the basic EU values to create non-discrimination between men and women, so it should also apply to the military. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Georges Dassis, you wanted to come in?
Non, quelques mots. Pour moi personnellement, mais je pense pour le Comité économique et social européen aussi, toute personne qui exerce un métier, quel qu'il soit, des salariés, et nous sommes en présence justement des salariés, des services publics, doit jouir de la liberté d'association, et notamment de la liberté syndicale. En plus, tous les pays membres de l'Union européenne ont ratifié la Convention numéro 87, Convention internationale du travail, qui garantit la liberté syndicale. Donc, je crois avoir assisté à un débat avec monsieur qui était intervenu lorsque j'étais membre du comité exécutif de la Confédération européenne des syndicats. Je pense qu'il devrait avoir effectivement une plainte à la Cour de Luxembourg pour non-respect de la liberté d'association. Et je dirais pour les pays qui ne respectent pas ces droits, déposer aussi une plainte au Bureau international du travail afin qu'elle soit discutée lors de la conférence internationale qui se tient chaque année au mois de juin.
Thank you. Emily, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you for raising that. I don't think I've heard that particular issue raised in many ombudsman conferences like this, so I think one of the first things you do to attempt to make change is to raise consciousness, and you've started that by asking that question and making us think about it. I know there are, including in my own country in Ireland, Defence Forces ombudsmen. They have their own restraints and capacities, and they differ as between countries. But one of the values of the network that we run, and indeed the IOI as well, is that we share good practice and we share problems as well. So if there were specific questions that you wanted to raise or specific issues that you wanted to raise among the wider Ombudsman community, then we would be happy to facilitate that through our extranet. So if you want to get in touch with us after this, I'd be happy to do that.
So good advice to you from several of our panelists. Sir, please. Can you just put up your hand so we get,
My name is Manuel Letertua. I'm the Ombudsman of the Basque Country. And I wanted to make a comment on something that Andreas Pottakis said, which made me feel a bit concerned. He mentioned a case or a perception in Greece about the fact that the European law decisions, case law, whatever, are being used in Greece as an argument to undermine the level of social protection in that country. And I think this runs precisely counter the presentation that was made by O Reilly earlier about Europe, the third social pillar, presented by President Juncker in the European Parliament recently. I think this is an extremely worrying feeling, pessimistic and negative feeling about what Europe means. If Europe serves the purpose of undermining the level of social protection, something is going very, very wrong. I belong to a small country where we still have a very positive feeling of what Europe means. It means a higher level of protection, not a lower level of protection. We believe that membership of the European Union will protect us, will protect the citizens of the Basque country against risks and will defend us against the challenges of the world ahead. As an ombudsman, I try always to use to support my decisions as far as I can, and recommendations to the Basque authorities on the EU legislation.
Right.
I try to show that if we have to do something in the social field or in the protection of the environment, or on the issue of energy poverty, is because Europe is requiring us to make an additional effort. And therefore, I think we ombudsmen can still play a positive role in promoting this positive aspect of European membership and reestablishing the good image that sometimes somewhere in other places is lacking in our continent. Thank you.
Andreas, let's get... Okay, Monsieur Dassis, okay.
Oui. Madame O Reilly a évoqué le socle des droits sociaux annoncé par le président Juncker. L'institution que je préside a salué cette initiative, mais il est évident que nous sommes loin de l'application de ces droits qui sont très bien décrits. En fait, le président Juncker a eu raison de lancer ces propositions. En coopération avec le Premier ministre suédois, un sommet social a été organisé à Göteborg le 14-15 novembre. Je me suis déjà prononcé, j'ai dit qu'il devrait y avoir des sommets sociaux chaque année, et pas seulement de sommets économiques. Et ce socle a été proclamé solennellement valable, mais pour l'instant, ce n'est qu'une déclaration. Il n'y a aucune contrainte pour les États membres pour appliquer ces droits. Je ne suis pas optimiste parce que j'ai assisté, même participé à la rédaction de la Charte des droits sociaux fondamentaux, il y a bien longtemps. Et à l'époque, j'étais furieux, parce que j'avais beaucoup travaillé avec mes camarades et avec les employeurs, lorsque, au sommet de Strasbourg, François Mitterrand et Helmut Kohl, le couple français, ont déclaré solennellement cette charte. Et j'avais dit avec d'autres personnes d'ailleurs que c'est inacceptable. On nous avait promis une charte contraignante et on est sorti avec une déclaration platonique, comme j'avais dit. Et je dois dire, 20 ans après, je me rends compte que c'est un passage obligatoire. Donc la déclaration solennelle de l'adoption du socle est faite. Maintenant, il faut que la Commission européenne, et ça, le Comité économique et social le rappelle à travers ses avis, propose des instruments contraignants afin que ces droits qui sont bien décrits, qui sont corrects, devienne une réalité pour tous les citoyens.
Right.
Donc nous sommes loin d'invoquer le socle. Bien sûr, il y a d'autres instruments contraignants au niveau de l'Union, notamment la charte, mais il y a un travail énorme à faire et je suis persuadé que les médiateurs, chacun dans son pays et tous ensemble, pourraient jouer un rôle formidable pour faire avancer ces socles et les rendre contraignants dans tous les pays et pour tous les citoyens. Merci.
Thank you very much. So yes, please. Underline the need for making it a legal charter that can be enforced. Please, Andreas.
Further to what Mr. Dassis mentioned, I didn't mean to disturb my dear friend Manuel, but the truth of the matter is, and this was my point, that there is a big gap between the political statements and announcements made here in Brussels at the central European level and the state of play in a number of countries, especially those who have been hit more hard by the fiscal crisis, and they have more way to cross more reforms to put in place to activate a number of changes within their whole system, social, administrative, economic, so that they may not have to face similar problems in the near future. The truth of the matter is that consecutive Greek governments, not only the present one, but also previous ones, have complained on a number of points that were included in the fiscal adjustment programs that the Greek governments had to sign up to, that a number of fundamental labor and social rights were being curtailed. And this was not just the point of view of the Greek government, let's say, but it was also the point of view of other organizations, including the ILO. So I don't think that it was something, what I said was something new. Maybe it might seem a bit shocking when we are talking about ways to somehow ensure an inclusive and more socially fair Europe. But the truth of the matter is that these sort of notions, these ideas, these axioms, these principles are not somehow implemented in the same way throughout the European Union zone.
Thank you. Ulrike, you wanted to come in?
Just a sentence to cut back to this, but it comes also back to what we discussed on Poland. I'm sorry for repeating, but I think we will need to really go for a legal process of convergence to build the principle of political equality of all citizens. And then comes normally and precisely because you say the Greek were expecting sort of more social protection from Europe and not less, but they got less, yeah? And basically the Poles didn't get enough and so on and so forth. So if we want to get the chauvinism out of our discussions, which is that the Germans are victimizing against the Greeks and so on and so forth, then we will need to establish the principle of political equality, meaning equal in front of the law, in social rights, in taxation and so on and so forth for all European citizens. Now, the counter-argument, and I know it very well, is that costs too much. Okay, then fine. Is there anything that is a free lunch? I mean, are we really considering that Europe does not cost anything? If Europe is a good thing, it should cost something. We pay for utopia or we pay for dystopia. And for the moment we pay for dystopia because we go nuts and we go into nationalism, and then we don't even have a price tag to what it will cost us if we lose single market, currency, democracy, freedom, and so on and so forth. So that's the counter-argument. But here I give you the example, because I'm German. With the Treaty of Unification in '91, we established basically same legal conditions, so equality for all German citizens through the Treaty of German Unification. This does not mean that as of today, 27 years after unification, an East German policeman has the same salary than a West European policeman. They are still of sort of 90% equalization, yeah? What I mean is, what we need for the next Europe we want to build is the legal promise that at some point we will get there. We need to write it down today so as to have a perspective that in 10, 15 years we will get there. That is the thing. And I think that we can do today. Obviously, we'll have time to lift the Polish from 250 retirement things to, what is the German average, 800 or so, yeah? We do not need to do it today, tomorrow, in 3 months, in 3 years, but we will need to give the promise to not lose it all. I think that is really what I think.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take a question or two from you on some of the issues that have been raised. Okay. I don't see any raising of hands. So let me turn back to you, the panel. So, you know, Emily, you said in the beginning, in your introductory remarks, when you were talking about the social pillar, you said these rights are not fully formed, but rather in gestation, right? And you said, to use a different analogy, the EU has created a machine that cannot be operated without a key. And in the absence of the pillar being afforded the same legal weight as the Charter of Fundamental Rights, the key lies in all of our hands. I think that's a very powerful statement about where things are, and I think the panel has more or less talked about it and tried to find that key and how to use it in the coming weeks and months ahead. My question to all of you as we go for lunch later is, what have you decided now, after this conversation, after having heard all of your different comments, the challenges you face, but also the ways in which you are actually using a bit of the key to change things for citizens? What do you think you can do now, in the months ahead, leading up to the European Parliament elections, leading up to the changes across the executive as well? Can you do now to bring that social pillar, those social values, into the forefront, to make that citizenship a visible thing, a relevant thing, a palpable thing? Because, as you said, all of you, it is a make or break moment. We are facing choices, very, very difficult choices about what Europe is going to be in this 21st century. I'm going to give you the floor in a minute, Ulrike, but I think let's start with the Ombudsman, because, you know, this is your conference in a sense, and you are the people who are there in the field, in your jobs, as Reinier said, actually trying to find the cases, right? Trying to find the cases that make the change possible. So can I start with the Ombudsman and then go back to the policymakers and the policy experts as well? Would you like to start, Adam?
I would like to say three short statements. First of all, even our debate shows how important that kind of debate is at the national level. So basically, what should be guaranteed at the domestic level, what should be guaranteed at the EU level, what is the impact of EU laws on the domestic policies concerning social rights, and I think what is particularly striking, and I think that's a very interesting statement out of our panel, is that there is a need for some vision, okay? That there is some need for not about talking just what will happen in 3-4 years and what kind of directive we should prepare just immediately in the, I don't know, next term of the parliament, but basically what we should think about the European Union in 2050. So in 30 years. I think that's quite interesting perspective to look at it. The second point, and we didn't mention this really, is that there are Council of Europe instruments concerning social rights. And what I'm missing, especially in my country, is that we didn't ratify the revised European Social Charter, but we also didn't ratify those complaint mechanisms that allow for submission of cases to the either the UN Committee on Social and Economic and Cultural Rights or to the European Committee on Social Rights. And I think those mechanisms are really important because they show the real image and real perspective on what kind of rights are not guaranteed. So thanks to cases, you can start discussion on the real guarantee of some rights. And the third point, and I think that the next panel will be about it to a great extent, is the question of communication. Because whatever we do, whatever issues or cases we take, we really miss this connection by using different communication techniques. So even when we are talking about, let's say, the EU role in the context of the protection of social rights, we should have at the same time ability to explain in plain language what does it really mean for the ordinary citizen, you know? So why EU at all is relevant in this thing. And for this, in my opinion, we still need instruments and knowledge and know-how how to do it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I think there is a workshop and a discussion later on social media usage by ombudsmen. So, Reinier, please.
As you probably have noticed, I'd like to be very practical.
Yes, please.
Number one is to train my people at home in The Hague that if somebody phones with a problem, there might be a European dimension behind it. And not say, you know, this is the law, we can't change that, sorry, your complaint can't be received.
Having the agency
so
to do
make
that.
people more, you know, what do you say in English?
Empowered?
Yeah, well, yeah, empowered, have to give them the knowledge. And take complaints we probably wouldn't have taken last year, we will take them this year because there is a European dimension in it.
Right.
And then second part is, and I will do that next April, every half year I go for 3 or 4 days into, I would call the countryside from the Hague perspective at least. So we're going to one of the provinces with the borders with Germany. And in that program we already have scheduled meetings with civil servants on both sides of the border, with burgomasters, with other officials, and see what's going on there when it comes to cross-border living, working, housing, social benefits, etc., etc. And show as an ombudsman that those type of problems are also the problems we will take care of if there is something going wrong. And third part is coming back to what I said earlier. I think there is a lot of knowledge in this group we should share and we should prioritize and say, well, let's pick out 3 or 4 points for the next 1 or 2 years. As Andreas rightly said, it is firstly about the present and then we make the vision for the future. So let's start with the present and in the meantime start developing the future, the future vision. But to combine and to put together what we already know is very important and give that signal also here in Brussels and not only in our own circles.
Thank you very much. Andreas, you talked about, you talked about a new theme when you made your introductory remarks.
Yes, well, I'll try to summarize as quickly as possible what I think I'm going to take back with me from this year's meeting and this morning's session. And I think more emphasis, more effort on actually trying to deal with what my friend from the Basque Country mentioned, Mr. Lezertua. Not only trying to see how the new theme will evolve and whether there will be any substance in it apart from a very, very strong political wording, but also to try to see that the existing legislation, the existing safeguards, the existing safety net, as far as social rights, labor rights are concerned, is in fact being respected and implemented. I would also agree with Reinier in what he said, that more and more I realize that a number of issues, we have discussed it several times, have transcend our national jurisdictions. They have, the symptoms seem to be, and the patterns seem to be similar in many jurisdictions, which probably leads us to, I mean, we should be thinking that perhaps the problem is not situated where we felt originally that it is, but perhaps at a European Union level on a number of issues. And so there I would think that the European Ombudsman's also role would be extremely important and key in it.
Thank you. Ulrike, you kicked off with a very inspiring message, which was basically, I mean, I'm really summarizing, that citizenship doesn't have to be linked to national identity, that it's a cross-border thing, it's a European-wide thing. I can't help asking you, where does that put the new Europeans, the immigrants who have arrived? Is that helpful? I would say it is, but I would like your opinion on that, but also your takeaway from this conference.
Okay, so starting with your question first, is it helpful for the migrants? If there are 4 definitions of what a nation is, I start with Ernest Renan, sociologue in the 20th century, 1890, in the 19th century. A nation is what has a common future. We can agree that's Europe. The second definition is Rosan Vallon, voting equality. The French nation was made because at some point after the revolution, the French started to vote directly and equally together. The third is Anderson, imaginated community. That's what we are doing. We're imagining ourselves into a political community. And the fourth is the one I already gave you, is Marcel Mauss, institutionalized solidarity. That's, in essence, is what Macron wants. If Macron wants a Eurozone parliament and a Eurozone budget and so on and so forth, and we're discussing this, and obviously the Germans are against, then what it's about is institutionalized solidarity, period. I guess we are close to these 4 definitions. And all these definitions of a nation have one thing. They are legal definitions, and they have nothing to do with culture and origin. So, and that is the answer to the refugees and the migrants who is in here, who is accepted after whatever European asylum laws and so on and so forth, is in that definition of European citizenship. And independently from whether he's born Syrian, but then in Europe, or Danish, and so on and so forth. So that would be my offer to that discussion. Now, just a little sort of joke back to the present-future thing. I know that this sort of vision thing is normally, you know, or we need to care for the present. My answer is there's no future, there's no presence if you don't care for the future, yeah? The thing is, I promise you, you wake up in the desert and you walk without a compass. You arrive and you walk the whole day. You arrive precisely where you started. You go in circles. So a vision is nothing else than a compass for a society or for a political system. And if a society or political system has not a vision and a legalized vision, that is where we want to go. German unification, now we do it, sort of thing. Then you go in circles. And Europe has, since at least 10 years, going around in circles, and that is why it's disintegrating today. So that is the vision sort of presence thing. But now, what do I take out of this conference? I take out a strong ambition to do something for the citizens, to get them social, to get them equalized in their social rights, and a strong commitment to that. So here I allow myself to be a little bit cynical. If we are serious about that, the first things to do is drop better regulation thing. Because better regulation is the bubble of Brussels technocracy. Why? Because it regulates essentially that you must do regulation, better regulation, which you put an efficiency paradigm on. Right. So only if it's efficient and doesn't cost too much and so on and so forth, then it is better regulation. So if we say that we want an emancipatory act for nivelization of citizens in their social rights, you cannot apply an efficiency paradigm to that. So better regulation needs to go away. If I invite the European Ombudsman to do one thing, get away with better regulation. And then we have the chance to do the following. Then we are citizens, and the citizens are the sovereign of the system. And because they are sovereign, they can decide what they want to decide, even if it costs money. That is what is sovereign. And that is why a parliament has the noblest right to vote on a budget, because we are the sovereigns in the sense that we can decide where do we want to spend the money on. Right. And it has just nothing to do with better regulation or whether that decision is efficient. Right. We can decide that we want decent retirement. We can decide that we want European basic income. We can decide that if we place ourselves as the citizens, as the sovereigns in the Europe of tomorrow. That would be my pledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A lot of food for thought in what you've said, Ulrike. Thank you very much indeed. Monsieur Dassis.
Moi, c'est la première fois que je me trouve avec autant de juristes éminents. En général, mes réunions, c'est avec des syndicalistes, avec des patrons, des représentants patronaux. Et je suis heureux de constater qu'il y a une sensibilité énorme sur les aspects sociaux de cette Union européenne. Mais je n'ai pas caché mon inquiétude en vue des prochaines élections européennes. Quand je vois les résultats des élections en Italie, presque 40% de citoyens italiens se sont prononcés sur une seule question, les migrants. Et il est sûr et certain que ces citoyens qui ont considéré qu'il y a trop de migrants en Italie ne se sont même pas posé la question qu'il y a des quartiers à Milano ou à Rome ou dans d'autres grandes villes italiennes qui ont revécu, qui vivent, qui sont devenus vivants grâce à l'apport des migrants. Concernant les réfugiés, notre comité a été la première institution à se mobiliser avec le début de la crise des réfugiés. En novembre 2015, nous avons décidé d'envoyer des petites délégations. Nous n'avons pas de gros moyens au comité, mais 3 personnes, un par groupe, un syndicaliste, un représentant patronal et un du 3e groupe, se sont rendus dans 10 pays membres de l'Union. Ils sont rendus aussi en Turquie. Et le rapport que nous avons présenté après avoir débattu en séance plénière, nous l'avons envoyé à la Commission européenne qui l'a bien utilisé. Bien sûr, la Commission n'a pas pu prendre, ou elle a pris, mais le Conseil n'a pas pu décider, parce que concernant la situation des migrants dans certains pays, et notamment en Turquie, c'est une situation tout à fait inacceptable. On a aussi dénoncé, c'est peut-être un grand mot, en tout cas souligné, avec amertume, que l'Union européenne a été inexistante dans la crise des réfugiés. Tout le poids est tombé sur les pays périphériques, et particulièrement sur l'Italie, au début sur Malte, et puis sur la Grèce. Et nous avons insisté sur le fait qu'il faut une vraie solidarité dans ces domaines-là. Donc les élections, c'est dans 14 mois en principe. Et les citoyens vont être appelés à se prononcer. Mais sur base de quel débat? Parce que jusqu'à présent, j'ai suivi d'assez près toutes les élections européennes. Les débats pendant la campagne des élections européennes n'a jamais été un débat européen. Ça a toujours été un débat national, dans pratiquement tous les pays. Est-ce que les femmes et les hommes politiques se rendront compte qu'on ne peut pas construire une Europe unie en cachant la vérité aux citoyens, notamment en présentant tous les succès comme étant les succès personnels des ministres, et les échecs, c'est la faute à l'Union européenne. Est-ce qu'ils vont se rendre compte que pour les élections européennes, le débat doit être européen? Et comme j'ai dit lors de ma première intervention, informer les gens sur tous les biens que cette union a apportés, malgré ses défauts. Et surtout insister sur ce que l'on veut faire, ce que les décideurs voudront faire dans l'avenir. Et une des choses dont on n'a pas parlé, on n'a pas eu le temps, mais je tiens quand même à souligner qu'il est triste de constater qu'en 2018, on est sur un budget de l'Union qui est inférieur à 1% du PIB de l'Union. Ce débat, nous l'avions déjà en 2006, 2010, ainsi de suite. Et il faut se rendre compte qu'avec un budget si peu élevé, il est impossible de réaliser toutes les ambitions qui sont affichées bien souvent par des hommes politiques et des femmes politiques au plus haut niveau. Donc il est urgent aussi que les citoyens, notamment les citoyens des pays considérés comme pays contributeurs nets, soient informés que s'ils payent un peu plus pour l'existence de cette union, c'est parce qu'ils profitent plus, et tant mieux. Qu'ils ne présentent pas, qu'ils expliquent enfin que la contribution dans cette union, ce n'est pas une dépense, c'est un investissement pour garantir la paix, c'est un investissement pour vivre dans la paix, dans le bien-être de tout le monde. Et le seul point positif, du moins un peu positif, c'est que le commissaire Oettinger, lors d'un débat il y a 20 jours, où j'ai participé, il a annoncé que la Commission va demander un budget qui sera 1 plus X Alors X égale combien? Alors si j'avais une baguette magique, je dirais il faudrait doubler tout de suite. Si on veut réaliser ce que Madame disait tout à l'heure, c'est que si on veut faire en sorte que tous les citoyens soient égaux devant la loi, et si tous les citoyens puissent bénéficier d'un droit qui est plus que fondamental, existentiel, je dirais, être égal aussi devant la faim, devant l'éducation, devant la formation, devant la vie. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dassis. I'm glad you were optimistic towards the end. Thank you very much indeed. Emily, please.
Obviously, this can be viewed on very many levels. When Ulrike talks about vision, I absolutely agree, but I think it's important to find out what the arguably competing visions of others are, and what the vision of the Council might be, the Eurogroup, the ECB, all of those institutions, so which therefore I think, just to repeat what I said earlier, it's very important that we see what they're out at, what their decision-making process is, and that there has to be a great deal more of transparency and accountability from those groups that to a certain extent have avoided that over the last while, certainly during the financial crisis when they were making such big decisions that impacted on all of us, in some countries obviously more than others. On a more practical level, last week I met with members of a Brussels-based organisation that acts as an umbrella body for civil society organisations, and we were discussing precisely what we're discussing now, which is how the role of ombudsman in social Europe. And at the end of the meeting, after we'd said that perhaps there may not be a very strong awareness in the first instance of the proclamation itself, firstly, and secondly, that people might not be too sure about how they can apply it in their own work, particularly given the lack of legal status that it has, that we agreed that we would work up a paper called Social Europe and the Ombudsman, or the Ombudsman and Social Europe, just to sort of outline the parameters of where we could possibly act. And like Reinier and the other Ombudsman on the panel, I'm also very practical, and I think finding those cases or using the cases that come to us as a sort of a show and tell phenomenon is very useful. I remember when I was Irish Ombudsman and the British and the Irish government had separately incorporated the European Convention on Human Rights into their legislation. And I remember as Ombudsman we got together over, I think, several days, and I think we had a couple of seminars, and asking ourselves, interrogating as to how precisely we could incorporate the European Convention of Human Rights in our work. For example, if you're dealing with somebody with a disability and they're being refused a benefit, if you're dealing with somebody who has a housing issue, then perhaps you can look at a particular article within the Convention, you know, whether it's the right to a family life, the right not to have to endure degrading treatment. And I think that Social Europe, the proclamation, can be used in that way as well. And I think, again, as Reinier and others have said, I think it's very important that we, as a network, whether it's our particular network or the IOI, that we work together in very practical ways with each other, with our colleagues, and that we give examples of our work and show examples of our work where we can invoke this pillar and where we can actually make it a living document and not just a collection of inanimate words, as I said at the beginning.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Emily. Thank you very much to all the panelists for, I'd say, a very rich and enriching discussion. I always say that there's more to Europe than meets the eye. When I'm asked to explain what Europe is today to the many people I meet when I travel as part of my job, it's always questions about Europe. We are watched by the world. And as we enter this period of challenges and tests to our values, to our democracies, to our rule of law, the world is watching. And I think what you have said today resonates with many people across the world, because the values that we speak of, many people around the world want. Perhaps their governments don't believe in them or want them, but the people do. And I think your message today about citizenship, about solidarity, about having a vision so you don't go round and round in circles, resonates across the world. world, not just here in Brussels. And I also appreciate that while we've talked a lot about the deficits of Europe today, and God knows there are many, but it's also, I think, very inspiring that all of you are actually working to fill those gaps. And that is the hope that you give to Europe, but I would say actually to the wider world as well. The hope of making things different, of changing things. And I think all 6 of you in your different ways have brought that theme forward. Yes, we can make a difference. Yes, we can make a difference. Yes, we can change things in a very complicated world. So thank you very much indeed to all 6 of you. Thank you for your questions. And just a little bit to say that lunch break awaits you. Lunch is open for everyone. Everyone here, please join us there. And after lunch, the next session, which I'll also be moderating, will start at 2 o'clock again in this room. So thank you once again, and see you later.